of government, unfortunately, we're not going to get that kind of strategic approach.
Very good.
I call Claudette Hauiti.
Katoa kia hau ki te mihi a koe. I stand to commend this bill to the House. Kia ora.
All right. Call Phil Twyford.
Well, that was, even by Claudette Hauiti's standards, a very short and enigmatic speech. There is plenty to say about this bill. There is plenty to say about this bill, Mr. Speaker. This is a
5 minute?
5 minute call.
5 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Marine reserves are, I think, increasingly an important part of the conservation agenda, and I wanted to just start really by noting that marine conservation has been, I suppose, the poor cousin in the conservation field, and as New Zealanders, I think we were probably late to the game. For at least a couple of decades, much of the kind of conservation energy was really devoted to protecting our forests and our terrestrial biodiversity. And I think it's been really heartening to see that New Zealanders increasingly see the importance of our coastal marine environment, but also our inland waterways. And the degradation of our streams and our rivers from intensive dairying and other uses that are really putting those waterways at threat has become a major public focus. And our marine environment also, particularly in areas where you've got large populations and where urbanisation, industrial development, and even just recreational use depletes fish stocks and shellfish populations. So this is something that's increasingly coming up the agenda, and as a number of colleagues have pointed out, there has been a little too much self-congratulation on the government benches over this bill, considering that these marine reserves have been sitting around for a number of years and were in fact started off during the fifth Labor government. And also I think while it's undoubtedly a positive thing that these marine reserves are being created, they are, you'd have to say, low-hanging fruit. There is very little in the way of commercial fishing where these zones are down in the Subantarctic islands. There are not big commercial vested interests who are wanting to protect their right to fish in the area, although I know earlier in the debate a number of speakers have pointed out that one of the zones I think is somewhat truncated in order to allow the possibility that the industry might develop some commercial fishing in that area. These reserves are low-hanging fruit, and it would be great to see the Minister show the same kind of enthusiasm and resolve for establishing marine reserves in the Hauraki Gulf. That would be a fine thing. It's an altogether more complicated proposition to establish marine reserves close to a large population base. But that is exactly what I think we should be doing, Mr. Speaker. And I recently spent a few days kayaking around the Waitemata harbour and spent time with many of the marine biologists, various scientists and environmental activists working in the Hauraki Gulf, working to kind of restore those waters. And they make the case that actually, in terms of repairing the damaged habitats, marine reserves are really probably the most powerful tool that we have. And the particular problem in the Hauraki Gulf is where the depletion of crayfish and snapper stocks has been so severe that it has allowed for an explosion in the population of kinna, believe it or not. And what the kinna do when they reach a certain level, Mr. Speaker, is that they wipe out the kelp forests, which are the kind of endemic habitat there in the Gulf. And they create these things called kinna barrens. And basically it's completely bare floor ocean floor devoid of any kind of vegetation or devoid of any life except for kinna. Now, if you really love kinna, you might think that that's a fine thing, but it's a very much a degraded habitat. And the only way that we know to restore that habitat and to restore the biodiversity, like snapper and the crayfish, is through the marine reserves. And reserves at places like Hahei and up at Goat Island have demonstrated how successful that is. Now, I don't suppose that the problems are the same down in the subantarctic islands, but nevertheless, we do support the creation of these reserves, and we want to see many more of them.
Sure. I call Eugenia Sage, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.